everybody, like, how long you been on council?
Okay. I've been on council since January 1 of 2016. This is my second term because Anderson County Council serves 2-year terms. And I believe we're one of the few counties in the state that do that. But every 2 years we're up for re-election, and I'm fortunate enough to be in my second term.
And then what have you learned during your first term as a council person?
The biggest thing is that change takes time. You can see a problem, you can see things that you want to do, but by nature, a council has to deliberately go through all of the steps and committees and taking it to council. There's 3 readings once it gets to council, and even at that point, there's an implementation period for the staff to actually fundamentally make it work. So initially you come in, you say, hey, these are things I want to do. I want to make a difference immediately. And you get to start that process immediately, but you don't always get to see the fruits of your efforts until sometimes a year to 18 months down the road.
Has anything surprised you about being a councilman that you didn't expect?
I would probably say the thing that surprised me is I get mistaken a good bit for city council. A good many people call me for city council. Also being District 1 county councilman, I get a good many calls from District 1 school district. So sometimes there's a lot of layers of government and people aren't always sure where to call. I'm always happy to help redirect them, but that sort of surprised me. And sometimes with anything that you do, you get consumed in it and you think that everybody else knows about it, and having to communicate to the community, where you're serving, what you're trying to do, it's an ongoing challenge.
Remind people what your district, what area your district comprises, and also what are some of the biggest challenges for your district?
My district, District 1, basically is Main Street all the way up to the East West Connector. It goes the East West Connector over to Ingalls and then back over to Midway Road, incorporates Cobb's Glen, then comes back down the boulevard where Anderson University is, back to the city. So I have the top half of the city and then a small portion of the county on the north side, on the outside of the city. For my district, much of the feedback I get is around recreation. With the city already having an overlay in my district, there are additional services that are being performed for residents. Now, at the same time, those residents are paying city taxes, so they're paying for those services. And so people talk to me about quality of life. They talk to me about recreation. Public safety is always a concern, but fortunately, with my district, we have a combination of the sheriff's department and the city police department. So unlike the districts that are more rural of nature, I would find quality of life, parks, recreation, public safety dominate the conversation.
What are some of the challenges in your district that your constituents may not think about, may not be on their radar?
Infrastructure is always a challenge, and it was off of my radar. I mean, I like everybody, you turn on the water and it's there. You just assume sewer's there. And when I say infrastructure too, I talk about like police or EMS service. You just assume that it's there, and it's a challenge to make all these things work countywide, but also within the district, because the lines of your district are pretty randomly chosen. I mean, who knows how that happened? And so the services that need to be performed for that district, there's concerns that overlap into other districts. So you're always trying to reconcile what makes sense from a fire standpoint, police standpoint, EMS standpoint, but then paving, water, sewer infrastructure, because there'd be part of the district might be using a cooperative agreement with the city. There might be another part of the district that's being served directly by the county. And so those are always challenges. Some of those are just coordination challenges. Some of them are relationship-based challenges, because with any entity, new people are always coming in. People are leaving. There's attrition. And so then there's always groups of people who are working together and trying to pick up where they left off.
One of the probably most dramatic changes in the counties in your district, East West Parkway. Talk about how that has changed your district in the last couple of years.
Well, when it first came about, and I was excited about just being able to get from Main Street to 81 without having to come down to Concord to Reed Road. Having grown up on the top side of exit 19, I said, well, this is great. It's going to save so much time if I'm going to the hospital or to the YMCA or that. But something I didn't expect was the popularity of the walking trail beside the connector. And every day that I go out there, there's people running, there's people riding bikes, there's cars at Ingalls parked where people wanting to get on it. And it's not just folks who live right at the connector. I hear, my mother included. I know that people will go park their cars because they want to go walk on the connector. And that's been a good thing. Also, I think with the popularity of it, it's allowed us to talk about the expansion of the trail and coming across the connector and connected to ANMED. I think it's allowed for a vision of how do we connect it over to the Civic Center and increase the amenities with it. So that's a positive thing, especially with what's going on in the backdrop of, locally and nationally where, people want to be healthier. They're getting out, they're wanting to be active, and, it's tough with this big rainy season that we've had since October, but sure enough, as soon as it's 65 degrees, 70 degrees and a sunny day, it's packed. And so that's a wonderful thing because that's people who are living in the community but also enjoying the community.
Council's now starting to work on the budget for 1920 and
Yeah.
2019, 2020. What are some of the big issues facing the budget coming up here as y'all start working on it?
Well, the first thing you look at is the anticipation of what the revenue projection is for the next year. So, what do you have to work with? And once you see what you have to work with, then the second thing is, what are other entities going to mandate on you? Because, we're still subject to the state, we're still subject to the federal government, and we don't have a choice. Sometimes they'll send things down, and from the state level, we're going to have to meet pension obligations. Obviously, from the federal level, we have to meet new regulations when it comes to environmental and processing of certain things. So once you find your top number, and then you put in your mandates, and hopefully you have a margin there that you can then look to what services need to be enhanced, where are items that we need to do better, and at the same time, where are items that we can back off of. Sometimes there are things that are a problem, we address those problems, and then we can back off on the budget and move those resources to another area. But that's an ongoing discussion. Obviously, when department heads come forth, they're bringing the perspective of their mission and their department. Council, in my opinion, job is to take the 30,000-foot view and reconcile those wants and needs, sort of allocate the scarce resources among competing ends while meeting the mission of taking the whole county forward.
And I think one of the things that the county's tried to do is to be transparent in this whole process. That, you had a meeting, you're already having meetings to begin to talk about, and they're open to public, and the early budget drafts will be online. How important do you think it is that citizens participate in this process?
It's of the utmost importance because each council member brings their past experiences to council, and whether it be where they've lived in the county to the types of jobs that they've done, and that's invaluable because it gives them insight into certain areas, and we complement each other with our skill sets. But at the same time, one council member will see areas of interest that another council member won't, and vice versa. So inevitably, we need the public to be telling us certain items that are important to them, certain deficiencies in their areas that they would like to see addressed, because that allows us to roll it up and put it in the full package, because sometimes we, like anybody, can get laser focused on certain projects and they're worthy. But if we're not hearing about others from the community, then we can't adequately address them. So we've taken the challenge of a methodical, transparent approach. We'd rather have too many meetings and people get tired of having meetings, but everybody be able to share their voice and their concern in a way that gets true consideration. And this process will start, it started now. It'll go through March, April, and May with the goal of having a budget set for July 1. So we invite the public to to come out to the meetings. We invite the public. If you can't come out, just email us, call us, say, if you're having these meetings, please take this in consideration. We do our best to have a robust discussion on those items and follow up with you. If we don't have the answer, we'll make sure that we get with county staff who's the expert in that area, and we'll get you an answer. But it's, we serve the public, and so part of our goal is to have interaction with the public, not only individually in our districts, but as a body as a whole.
You grew up in Anderson.
Yes.
Did you ever, growing up here, think one day you'd be on county council?
Be honest with you, growing up, other than a high school civics class, I was more concerned about sports and hanging out and going to the beach. I probably didn't, as a youth, pay attention to county government. But as I got older, it was something I've always been interested in, politics and government, and I'm excited to be part of it. But no, when I was growing up, I probably never thought about it. But in hindsight, that's a good thing. We had leaders before us that were taking care of things, and I had a wonderful childhood here growing up, and that's part of the reason I want to be on council. I have kids of my own now, and I want them to grow up with opportunities that I had, and that they don't even have to think about things being taken care of, because our generation's taking care of it, and hopefully we raise them in a way where they'll be on city or county or whatever in the future to move the agenda forward.
And it's not an election year, so there's no politics involved in this question.
Yeah.
But what would you say to somebody who's just watching this and thinking, I might like to run for county council? What would you tell them?
I would say do it. You can overanalyze running for office sometimes. I've run across people who say, well, I'm not qualified, or I don't know about those things, and I say, well, you do know about them because this is your community. You've lived in it. You have experiences. Step forward, come to meetings, read minutes online, find areas that you want to be involved, and then when the opportunity arises, pull the trigger and do it and jump in, and that's, I've always sort of told people, when it comes to politics, that's the way to learn, is just to get involved.